So the module on open data is going to tie very much to things that we've already covered. Just going to look a little bit more at why would you want to open up your data and how that can be done. So why would you want to open up your data? So sharing data, I think, is a bit of a sensitive topic because there's so many unknowns. And there's also, I think, still a lot of concern about being scooped or about not being able to publish all the work that you want to do before someone else starts working on your data sets. But there's a range of reasons why you would want to share your data. For example, if you are running a research group and in your research group, you publish your data under open licenses, it means that every student that comes through your research group, I'm sorry, I've got a little frog in my throat. Every student who comes through your research group, every collaborator that you have in your projects can work with your data freely, understand what the licensing requirements are, understand how to cite it, and so that can make collaboration within a research group much easier already, or to bring on new collaborators. Or if you have students who leave and they have shared their data properly, then it also can help with sustainable access over time to data. There are also research projects which by definition, generate open data. For example, we've used open data from projects that create data sets related to geographical boundaries. We were involved in a project called AfriMapR, and we were developing our code to make mapping data sets easier in Africa using the African national and subnational boundary or border data. And so there's a project called GeoBoundaries, which is, I can't exactly remember where they sit, but they make, that research project is specifically about capturing data or collecting data sets related to boundaries and making that data sets open, interoperable, licensed to make sure that it is used, it can be used in the world, across the world, in different projects. So you can imagine government projects, research projects, school projects. It's a really, really cool data set. And we use that data set as part of our training as well. So we use this open data set not to do research with, but to create training materials, to teach African researchers how to use R to draw maps. So open data can have some very unexpected and highly impactful downstream uses as well. So we have a few mantras, and open by design is one of the mantras that we try and live by. So when we start with a project, we always think about how can we make this project as open as possible from the design stage already. Where are we going to go with our data? What are we going to do with our code? How will we publish? So that those conversations are had at the earliest possible stage, and also to clarify what the reasons are for making data open or closed, identifying risks with sharing data or any other research outputs that are being generated. Again, looking at what the funders and the institutional requirements are as well. So from the work that we've been doing over the past few years on open science, we realized that often open science are taught as this is good for other people. But we also understand that researchers have a lot on their plate, and doing extra work just for other people is sometimes a bit unreasonable to expect, but also just simply not, like, you do not have that extra time to do something that will benefit someone else. So with this course, we're trying to show you what are the open science practices and principles that you can apply in your work that will immediately benefit you, your research career, your research outputs. At the same time, how that practice and principles can benefit, have broader benefit outside of yourself, your research group, but for the broader, not only just the research community, but the broader public as well. So when you think of open science, you can kind of think of it in these three layers. So if I do this, how will it benefit me? How will it benefit the people that I collaborate with? And how will it benefit, or how will it impact people that I don't even know? So there are many things that you can consider when you are thinking about opening up your data. We've been discussing national frameworks, national legal frameworks, like the South African Open Science Policy, which are being developed, and that will be, mandated from the very top. It's not implemented yet. The NRF has a mandate, so that's a funder requirement. Your institution may also have an open science policy or an open access policy, and that often sits either in the research office or in the libraries. And you may have to dig a little to find out what your institutional open access or open science policy is. Or you might be interested enough to get involved in helping to shape your institutional open access or open science policy. There are also different open science practices in different disciplines. For example, physics has been practicing open science for the longest time because their equipment are very, very big, very, very expensive, and generates massive data. So people have for the longest time been using open infrastructure in physics and have been working in very large collaborative groups. So they have cemented some of the open science practices within physics over many, many years. So in your discipline, there are also specific standards and expectations. And then, of course, you as a researcher in a project, you might set up your own practices and expectations for your research project. Or if you're joining a project, it's really good to find out if the project have very specific data sharing, access and release policies, and so on. So, of course, data has different phases. You've got your raw data that are either collected from instruments or that are created by people, which then goes into this working stage where you are perhaps manipulating the data, making it, cleaning it up, converting formats, and analyzing and visualizing and integrating with other data sets as well. And then there is the published data and data that will go into an archive or storage. And all of this is considered in your research data management plan. And you might also come across the requirement to create research data management plans by your funders, by your project leaders. It's becoming more and more something that is encouraged. So that you think through how your research data will be managed throughout the life cycle, but also how it will be shared, how and if it will be shared, and if it is shared, where it will be shared, and under what licenses. So research data management plans cover a whole lot of questions. And really what the research data management plan helps you to do is to think through these questions, like what data will be created in this project. And very often, you'll find that you don't have all the answers at the outset of a project. A research data management is not a once-off document that you create and then put away. A research data management plan is really a live document which you can refer to, update. Universities are often releasing new infrastructure or new mandates for where research data should be stored. There's also information from national bodies like the RISA, the CHBC, and other organizations that Diplomics also works with that might influence what goes into your research data management plan. And here on the slide, and the slides will be available just after the workshop, we also give you a checklist, which really, really helps with creating your data management plan. So we've spoken about metadata already, and just quickly considering again, if you, for example, have a YouTube video, the YouTube video will be the data, the title, the platform where it's stored, the length of the video, who produced it, the license, the publication data, language, and keywords. That is all metadata. And in some cases, you might only share the metadata of your data set. So say, for example, you've generated metagenomics data sets for, I don't know, newborn, infant, something, I don't know. And that is very, very sensitive data, so you can't share it openly, or it's still under embargo, so it's not shared publicly. The data sets itself aren't shared. You can still share the metadata on open platforms that are indexed, so that someone might find the metadata, learn about your project, and approach you to say, listen, I see you've got this data set, we've got similar data sets, can we collaborate? Or we're creating maybe complementary data sets, or we are asking different questions from similar data sets. So it's a way of also creating visibility of your data and of your research. So by sharing your metadata. Again, choosing your repositories where you share your data depends on your funder, your institution, and legal requirements. Also your discipline. So your discipline will dictate where you will share your data. And in the case of, remember, in this case, we're talking specifically about the research data. We're not talking about other research outputs. So often that is highly dictated by the discipline. And then for these repositories, you will see it will differ in terms of what metadata is required, what licensing, as I said previously in the chat, what licensing are available, what kind of persistent identifiers are issued. Sometimes it will issue a DOI, sometimes it will only issue a handle, as I said before. It really depends on how the repository is accredited and so on. And then also access. So you can have open data that is behind a login. That is also a way of making data open. I mean, as Alexandra showed with the Creative Commons, there's always a scale of openness. And I know that Omics is also adopting the mantra of as open as possible, as closed as necessary, to make sure that if you have sensitive data, that you don't expose your participants, or if you are working with, say, for example, a highly endangered species or something more in the conservation area, that cannot just be shared publicly without some form of access restriction. That still counts as open data if you have got your metadata available. That is, in a very, very small nutshell, open data. So really your considerations of what license do you put on your data, where do you publish it, when do you publish it, why do you publish it? Much of that will be guided by the national, regional, institutional, funder, project, and discipline. So often you don't even have to make these decisions for yourself. You can put a little bit of work in just to understand what is happening in the context in which you are working. And you might find that there are already best practices or a selection of options that you can choose from in terms of how you make your data and your research available, and that you don't have to go and figure all of this out for yourself.